holding a sign that says, "All I want for Christmas is impeachment." Why are you out here? What does it mean for you to be out here?
Nobody's above the law. We have to impeach the president. There was an obvious quid pro quo, withholding federal aid to Ukraine in violation of the Logan Act, and we have to impeach him and restore democracy.
So the Democrats brought forward articles of impeachment late last week. You mentioned quid pro quo. Why do you think they included bribery in the articles of impeachment?
Yeah.
No, because it's like, do you think the Democrats have enough to move forward because they didn't include it? They didn't include things like extortion either. So they included things like abuse of power. But are those enough?
There's a majority of Democrats in the House, and I think there's votes in the House. Whether there's votes in the Senate or not, I don't know. But the president's going to get impeached. Yeah.
Is it still a worthwhile endeavor if we can't remove in the Senate and could only impeach in the House?
Yes. We have to think about the precedent. I mean, if we just don't go forward with it because we don't think we have the votes, I mean, what kind of precedent is that setting?
Yeah. I know we saw one House member from New Jersey who was a Democrat switch over to be Republican because he didn't think it was favorable for his political outlooks. Does that make you nervous at all?
Definitely, but we have seen a lot of Democrats in purple districts saying that they were going to vote for impeachment, so that makes me really optimistic.
I had another question. Many people in the media talk about Trump and they say how he's like a white supremacist or a white nationalist. Do you think that of Trump?
Yes.
That he's actually like a white nationalist, supremacist? Yes. What kind of policies make you think that, or what does he say to make you think that?
I mean, the Muslim ban, the things that he says about women, Muslims, Hispanics, I mean, we've never seen this in the Oval Office ever. It's completely unprecedented.
One last question. A lot of the media is talking about like the OK hand symbol. I wanted to ask you, does the OK hand symbol...
Army-Navy football game? Yeah.
Does this mean anything to you?
Yes.
What does that mean?
Yeah, it's a white supremacist hand gesture.
Should everybody in the media, when they see something like this, should we call this specifically a white supremacist like hand gesture, even though it's like a very common hand gesture that a lot of people use?
I mean, we have to be wary of using it, and it's context, yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Just quickly in conclusion, anything else you want to mention?
No, just impeach Trump.
If you don't get impeachment for Christmas, would you be sad that
yes,
you didn't get
extremely sad.
Okay, so we're going to have to get impeachment for Christmas.
Yes.
Thank you so much for your time.
So
I appreciate it. Thank you. So we are out here today in Times Square protesting Trump. Can you tell me a little bit more about why you're out here, what it means for you to be out here?
So I'm Rabbi Marisa James from Congregation Beit Simchat Torah. We're the largest LGBTQ synagogue in the world. And basically every single person in our congregation has been fighting for justice their entire lives in one way or another, and especially for minority populations. We have people who are LGBTQ, we have people of color, we have people who are Jewish, for heaven's sakes. We have an ongoing partnership with a mosque in town. So we would like to have somebody in office who actually cares about justice for any of those groups or any others who are currently impacted. And the fact that this guy is still in office after all of this time and just damaging one part of democracy after another and damaging one part of the people who live in this country after another is pretty appalling. So we'd like to see him go.
I know some people in the media would lead you to believe that Trump is anti-Semitic. Do you think Trump is anti-Semitic? Like, why or why not?
I think Trump is anti-anybody who's not himself. I think as long as he profits, he doesn't care who else he damages in the process. And if it's convenient for him to damage Jews or Muslims or immigrants or children in cages at the southern border, then he'll do it.
I know as recently as like last week, Trump was talking to the American-Israeli Council, or Israeli-American Council, here in New York City.
Yes.
Many Jewish leaders in the community were praising him, saying he was the most pro-Jewish president they've ever seen. So would you agree with any of those things, or do you think he's doing more harm than good to the community and to our general relationships with Israel?
He has been doing endless damage to everybody involved. He's been doing endless damage to anybody, and he will damage anyone he wants in order to profit. And there are always some people from...
He's from a right-wing outlet.
Great.
That I'll post on YouTube.
Okay.
I hope you didn't think I asked anything.
I'm just being honest. That's what I got. Anyway, sorry, I'm distracted now, but that's what I got.
Yeah, I want to follow up on a little bit of impeachment stuff. So we recently brought forth articles of impeachment late last week, but we didn't include things like bribery or extortion in the articles of impeachment. Does that concern you, like to have good cause to move forward with impeachment?
I'm not getting into those details right now. Yeah.
Absolutely. Just in conclusion, was there anything else you wanted to mention?
That's it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. Thank you. I see you have a sign over here. It says treason, bribery, high crimes and misdemeanors. You hit the trifecta. That's right. I asked somebody earlier, and I wanted to ask you too. In the articles of impeachment, Democrats didn't include bribery or extortion.
They mentioned it.
Why don't you think they had those specific charges though in there?
Well, they did mention bribery within the 600-page document that they released. They mentioned bribery in there. I was disappointed that they did not include it as an article. And really, treason should come forward too, because obviously he's part of Putin's regime, as far as I'm concerned, and so are most of these Republicans that are in office right now.
When you say he's a part of Putin's regime, do you mean he's legitimately being paid by the Russians or just
He
working
could
in
be.
their
We don't-
favor?
We don't know that, but we do know that he's held secret meetings with Russian officials, Russian diplomats, and without the press involved, and nobody knows the transcripts that were involved, but we do know that he's as dishonest as hell.
Didn't the Mueller report show that there was no collusion between Trump and the Russians? Wasn't like that the whole point of the whole 2-year report, and we were out here protesting before for
the
that?
Mueller report wasn't complete. They stopped that investigation. And we also know that not enough witnesses came forth to talk, and it's still going on. And they're under subpoena, and we're still waiting for. In fact, when I'm concerned about the Senate, they're not going to bring forth the subpoenas. So why bring it to the Senate?
I was going to ask if
impeach him, leave it in the House, keep investigating him.
so if the Senate can't remove, or if we don't think we have the votes in the House or the votes in the Senate to remove, is it a worthwhile endeavor to impeach in the
No,
House?
it's not that. What it is we can't even subpoena the witnesses that are involved.
They turned them down, and they need to go to court with that. It's a timely process, as I
Yeah,
understand.
but even in the Senate, they try to negotiate that, and I understand that they're turning that down. Mitch McConnell, Moscow Mitch, as you prefer.
I had one more topic I wanted to ask you about. So we have the elections coming up in November. So Trump didn't win the popular vote in 2016, but he did with the Electoral College. If that same thing happens again, would you accept the results of the election?
Hell no. No.
And why not?
Because the first election, he isn't even legitimate.
And why not? What's illegitimate about him?
We know that a lot of ballots weren't counted. They're still wiping people off the rolls in Wisconsin. I don't know how many thousands. I forget the number, but they've done that in Wisconsin. They're doing it in Georgia.
Do you think it's bad to question the legitimacy, though, of the president who was democratically elected in our system? No?
No.
Absolutely.
He is absolutely illegitimate.
So you think even in 2016 he's illegitimate?
That's right. He's not even qualified.
Absolutely.
He's not even qualified. He's corrupt. He's always been corrupt, and he's.
Some people in the media call him a white supremacist. Do you think he's a white supremacist?
I don't know if he is, but definitely a lot of the people in this cabinet,
Like who?
the name evades me right now. Stephen Miller.
Stephen Miller's a Jew, though. You don't think it's offensive to imply that
No.
he's a white supremacist?
No, he's not truly Jewish, as far as I'm concerned.
Why not? What makes him?
He is, but he's more of a Nazi. If you can understand
What
that.
makes him an actual Nazi, though? Isn't that offensive to call Jewish people Nazis when, Stephen Miller isn't, a part of the SS or something?
Well, what they're doing in the border, and basically doing to Muslims, is the same thing as what happened during World War II, what they did to the Jews.
You think the Holocaust is the same to what's going on the southern border?
It's close to that. I mean,
Okay, I disagree, but
we're separating children from parents and putting them in cages.
Okay.
And nobody should agree with that.
Absolutely. Just quickly in conclusion, was there anything else you wanted to mention?
I think we covered quite a bit.
Right. Thank you so much for your time, sir. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good one. So we're out here today in New York City. I see you're carrying the American flag. This is an Impeach Trump protest behind us. Can you tell me a little bit more about why you're out here, what it means for you to be out here?
So they're apparently going to vote tomorrow, and we're just showing our support, showing that we, the American people, are behind impeaching and removing the president. And we want to say it loud, and we want to say it a lot until our voices get hoarse.
Why do you think we should move forward with impeachment?
There's so many reasons. I suspect this won't be the last issue we have with our president. He just makes it worse on himself. It's a pretty narrow scope what they're impeaching him for, 2 articles.
I know they didn't include extortion or bribery. Does that concern you at all?
I wouldn't say concerned. I would say they can charge him with stuff later when he's inevitably out of office.
Do you think the Democrats are going to be successful in removing him from office?
No, not in removing him from office, but that's not exactly the point. The point is to do what we're supposed to do, impeachment in the Constitution. We're running out of time. We can't wait for another We can't wait for another election to be meddled with. Now or never. You know, I want to tell my grandkids that I helped hopefully stop this.
Yeah. Do you trust the media?
Well, there's all kinds of media.
No, in general though, do you trust much of the media where you're getting your news from?
Yes, I do, but you have to have many sources of news, not just one. And yeah.
Because I know there was some controversy this weekend with a specific hand symbol. It's the OK hand symbol. So do you think there's anything nefarious going on behind the OK hand symbol?
I think symbols can be like co-opted, and it all depends on the person who's doing it, what's in their heart, and if you're playing the what's it called, the game where you put your hand under there and then they can punch you.
Or like, do you think it potentially became a meme now that people just do it because it's stupid and could potentially get attention?
People do it because it gets attention, and it's an internet thing. It's hard to know where that stuff comes from, but.
I had one last question for you. The mainstream media would lead you to believe that Trump is a white nationalist or a white supremacist. Do you think that Trump is a white nationalist or a white supremacist?
He really has all the ingredients of it. Like if you were making a white nationalist like pie, he would. I mean,
what are those ingredients?
Hatred of others, disrespect for the people that you're supposed to be in charge of. Gosh, there's so many ingredients. I may have to check my list.
Because white supremacist is a bold claim, and we don't want to cheapen it at all. So do you legitimately believe that he is a white supremacist or a white nationalist, like the people in the media are saying?
I mean, I'm not saying he has like a robe in his closet, but if it walks like a duck and it talks like a duck and it smells like a duck and it speaks like a duck.
So what were some of the reasons, though? Because you said it was hatred. He seems like he's filled with hate. And I forgot what the second point was.
Why he's a white nationalist?
Yeah.
You take someone who is a white nationalist, who's a self-avowed white nationalist. You place their actions next to Trump in terms of who he says are good people, who he promotes, who the majority of the white nationalist voters vote for. You put those side by side, and that's how you compare. No, maybe we don't have a picture of him in a robe, but like.
So you think white supremacists would support a lot of the things that Trump does?
Yes, they do. Yeah.
So
man.
I know Trump's been very supportive of like our Israeli American and Jewish American community. He recently spoke at the American Israeli Council. Right. Do you think the white supremacists and white nationalists would like what he's doing with those people and those communities?
I mean, I think they have a similar end goal or means to an end.
Who?
Well, everybody. So white nationalist is different from someone who's pro-Israel, who is different from someone who's just culturally Jewish, who is different from someone who just identifies
so
as...
So what kind of policies do you think that a white supremacist would like that Trump's done?
A lot of it has to do with probably like voter suppression.
What type of voter suppression is going on?
So, okay, there's all different
Do you think
kinds.
that people should have an ID to need to vote? That we should need somebody to have an ID in order to vote?
No, not necessarily.
And why not? Couldn't that lead to voter fraud potentially if we didn't need an ID to vote?
No, like the studies have shown that there's more voter suppression rather than ballot tampering, if that makes sense. So there's really more of a risk of people in the media saying, or on the internet saying, hey, if you're an African American, you don't need to vote because they're not going to represent you. And then people are like, oh yeah, maybe I shouldn't. It's like it's
okay.
It's
So
that
you're
kind
talking
of
about that. I thought we were talking about strictly like
we're talking about a lot of things.
Yeah,
man.
no, because like for the voter ID stuff, like should there be any barrier to entry to be to have to identify people in order to get them to vote?
No, a small one, but this is policy stuff. Let's talk.
We're getting a little bit pedantic. I have this one last question for you. Assuming you don't want to see Trump win in 2020, who do you want to see take Trump out in 2020?
I think the best is Bernie Sanders.
Would you vote for Joe Biden if he was the eventual nominee?
I would vote for anyone other than Donald Trump, but Bernie Sanders is number one.
Thank you so much for your time, sir. I appreciate it. I see you're holding a sign that says, "The truth matters, make lies shameful again." Can you tell me a little bit more about why you're out here, what it means for you to be out here?
What it means to me is that Americans have to stand up and say we have standards here. We have the rule of law. We have a constitution. Our courts matter. Our government officials must be held to standards of telling the truth. and that if we don't come out in the streets and demand that, we won't get it back.
So it definitely seems like Democrats have the votes in the House to impeach, but not in the Senate to remove. Do you still think it's a worthwhile endeavor, even if they can't remove in the Senate?
Absolutely. It says that we're not going to tolerate what's going on, and we're on record as saying we're not going to tolerate what's going on. We must do that.
Absolutely. I also know, so in 2016, Trump lost the popular vote but won the Electoral College. If something similar happens in 2020, where Trump loses the popular vote but wins the Electoral College, will you accept those results of the election?
Yes, that's the system that we have.
And do you think we should change the Electoral College? Because I feel like there's been a lot of conversation surrounding that. Is that something you'd be interested in, or?
Yes, it was created basically to overweight the certain states, and it doesn't work well. It doesn't represent the voice of the American people. But as long as we have it, it is one of the institutions of our government, and we'll accept what it does. That doesn't mean I like it, and if we can go through a constitutional process to get rid of it, I'd be all in favor.
Absolutely. One other question that I had for you is that many in the media would have you believe or think that Trump is a white supremacist. Do you think Trump's a white supremacist, and do you think he's been getting fair coverage on any of these mainstream media, websites?
Of course he's a white supremacist. Do you remember that comment about shithole countries? You probably can't use that on the air. Do you remember the comment he made about countries where people of color come from? He is a white supremacist. He believes, even if he isn't in his own heart of hearts and it's purely strategic, that's the audience he caters to. He uses all the dog whistles that they recognize, and he summons them out of their hiding and says, your view is legitimate and you matter. And so who cares what he really thinks?
Yeah. So I know the shithole comment was mean, but we don't want to cheapen white supremacists, right? So is he actually a white supremacist when we call him that? Or are we just trying to call him, not nice and says mean things every now and then?
Remember that when the riots in Charleston, that in Virginia,
Charlottesville rally.
Charlottesville, thank you. It's a few years ago. He said there were nice people on both sides. Well, one of those sides was neo-Nazis. Those are white supremacists.
He went on to condemn them, but you're not buying that and
no.
still think it's a wink and a nod.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The people who follow him know what he meant.
Yeah. I want to backpack on that because I know recently articles have been saying that Stephen Miller, one of the people in Trump's administration, is a Nazi. Would you also think that Stephen Miller is a Nazi?
Well, he's not a Nazi. If you're a Nazi, you're a member of the National Socialist Party of Germany. Does he sympathize with those views? It really does seem that way. He's certainly anti-immigrant, although he himself is the offspring of immigrants, or the grandchild of immigrants. To say somebody is a Nazi is a whole package of beliefs. I would say he is a rabid anti-immigration bigot.
Absolutely. I had one last question for you. Who do you want to see beat Trump in 2020, assuming you're not going to vote for Trump, of course?
Absolutely any Democrat.
Even a Joe Biden?
Absolutely.
Even a Joe Biden. All right, cool. Anything else you want to mention?
Our country is better than this. We've done many shameful things in our country's history, but we are better than this. We care about the rule of law, and the rule of law will prevail again.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. Thank you. I see you have a sign over here. It says, okay, impeach McRapey face.
Yeah.
And then what's the other sign say?
Hello, motherfucker.
Can you tell me what the sides of the sign mean?
Yes, impeached McRapey face because the guy with over 20 sexual assault allegations, including one by one of his ex-wives of rape, is very fitting. And I'm a big fan of the Bodie McBoatface meme. So I really dig the rapey McRape face. I go with rapey McQuid pro quo face. And the Shalom motherfucker sign is due to the rampant rise in anti-Semitism. So we come in peace, shalom, but don't fuck with us. A lot of people think Jews are weak and we rely on our money, but that's not the case. So
many people call Trump anti-Semitic. Do you think Trump's anti-Semitic?
I think on one hand he's too stupid to be anti-Semitic. I really do think that there is something intrinsically wrong with him. However, the fact that he has made other anti-Semitic statements about only wanting guys with yarmulkes to handle his money, and there is a history there. He also actually hires Nazis to work in the plantation White House.
Who? He hires Nazis?
Seb Gorka is a legitimate...
You think it's an actual...
He is a legitimate Nazi. Check his war pins. Check his history. He's also a wanted felon from
Do you think
Hungary.
Trump is a white supremacist, an actual white supremacist?
Yes, his dad was a sheet-wearing racist.
And why is Trump a white supremacist? So what makes him...
Have you seen his cabinet? It's as white as the White House.
I don't know if that's particularly true.
It is particularly true.
Ben Carson at the very least.
Ben Carson is hiding under the $30,000 furniture that he bought in the HUD office with the rest of his family that he's brought in. It's so swampy, it's disgusting. Do I know factually? No. Am I there? No. Can I see with my own two eyes? I do have like a functioning brain cell, like one or two.
So I wanted to ask, I know in 2016, Trump didn't win the popular vote, but he did win the Electoral College. If Trump won the Electoral College in 2020 and not the popular vote, would he still be your legitimate president? Would you accept the results?
If he didn't cheat and Russia didn't pay for him to win the election, I mean, yeah, how could you not? But the dude cheated. And that's not fair. Like, it's just flat out not fair. You don't play fair in the sandbox, you don't get to win.
So you think he was legitimately working with the Russians to try to pervert the election in 2016?
Has he released his tax returns? Where's all his money? Putin's got his hand so far up his ass, it's about to come out the top of his
But
head.
didn't we have the whole Mueller report and they said no collusion?
Bro, there's definitely collusion. I mean, it's collusion, delusion, every oosian that you could possibly think of. I don't. Look, I'm not a politician. I'm not an expert. My friend is an expert in political science, not me. I try to do my homework and come across as somewhat intelligible and know what I'm talking about. I don't know everything. I don't stand here like anybody else and claim to know, but the facts are out, bro. I mean, it's a little hard when, you know, your entire staff that has defected from you is ratting you out and going to jail.
Yeah. Can you tell me a little bit more about why you're out here, what it means for you to be out here?
Well, I'm retired military. I served in the Army and the Air Force and then the White House. And so I look at what Trump is doing as a true national security threat. I saw it from the beginning. I see it now. I'm also a climate justice activist, and so at every level and at every turn, he's undoing what our Constitution, what our democracy is about. And I took an oath as well to defend against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And like so many of my fellow veterans, we never imagined that we would have to come home whether in or out of uniform, and continue to serve. But I'm doing it, I have been doing it, and I will continue to do it.
One of the military-related things that Trump's done in his recent tenure was withdrawing some troops from northern Syria. Many people liked that, many people didn't like that. Do you like that Trump did that?
Well, as someone who has actually been to Syria, not when I was in the military, but when I was working for a World Food Organization, I love the people, I love the land. When he decided to pull troops out, whether that's right or wrong, it's not for me to say. I can speak to how he did it,
Sure.
and then how he undid it, which just causes turmoil, and again, is a threat to our national security if our partners can't rely on us for what we say is our word, gets undone and then gets redone.
In the same vein, though, people talk like Tulsi Gabbard constantly talks about how we're in this endless war in the Middle East. We're constantly doing this regime change wars. And it seems like even when Trump does something that people should like, that people can't give him any credit for that. Do you feel any of that here, especially with this issue? Because like bringing the troops home, it's supposed to be something that's unanimously popular, but for some reason, it seems like whatever Trump does, people just do the opposite for. So is there any credit there?
I can't give him credit because it's not a thoughtful process, and he's not using he's not listening to his chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He's not listening to his Secretary of Defense. He has dismantled the Secretary of State and the State Department, which is our diplomatic way of resolving these things. So no, I can't give him for credit because it's chaotic, and it's not. It's just a tweet of the moment. If it was reasoned and if it would benefit our national security and the people that we went to protect and help, sure, I'd give him all the credit in the world, but I see nothing in this man that I can give him credit for. I really can't.
I had one other thing I wanted to follow up with you on because it relates to policing. So parts of the Trump campaign were surveilled. They had FISA warrants, right? The FBI was looking into them. They didn't find anything. And a lot of these FISA warrants were based on like baseless Steele dossier. I'm not sure if you're familiar with like the Horowitz report. And now James Comey recently, he went on a Fox News interview with Chris Wallace where they said there were tons of different mistakes that led them to begin the FISA warrant and look into Trump and have these investigations into Trump. Do you think Trump's getting a fair shake when it comes to people in the CIA, the FBI, or the media?
Yeah, I do. I think the man is incompetent, and he has been incompetent since day one.
Sure, but is he like backed by, because there's been the claims that he's backed by the Russians, you know, and he's working with our foreign adversaries, but incompetence is a different thing. Some people would say the FBI is incompetent because there were multiple mistakes that were used to get this FISA warrant. So is there any incompetence going on in the FBI as well?
I think that there are always, in situations like this, there are always ways to improve our process. Is this unfair to Trump? No. Should things be fixed?
Why isn't it
and
unfair to
tweaked?
Trump if these FISA warrants were based on baseless allegations in a Steele dossier?
Well, you can claim that as fact, and it sounds like you're claiming that as fact. And I don't think that
It's
that
according
is
to the
fair.
horror with the Inspector General report. So.
Well, I think that there is an admission that the process is that there are some mistakes in the process. Those, yeah, of course, they have to be improved. Yeah. But these are extraordinary times, and it doesn't excuse this man's abuse of power and this man's inability to lead this country.
Do you think he's getting a fair shake in the media?
I do.
Trump's getting a fair shake in the media.
I do.
I feel like a lot of different people in the media would have you believe that he's like a white supremacist. Do you think Trump's a white supremacist?
I do.
And what makes him a white supremacist?
I think that his policies, his statement about Charlotte was clearly race-based, and I think he is a race baiter. I think he is trying to rally his base underneath him and to fire them up. And I'm sorry, I just do.